1972, when I first met Filiberto, and we sat down on a bench like this, and I had the first conversation with the man that I was to follow for many years, and that path changed my life.
In 1976, Filiberto Ojeda and Juan Segarra banded together with others fighting for independence and formed Los Macheteros, or the cane cutters.
The context was that Vietnam had won. The Cuban Revolution at that time was like a beacon to a lot of Latin America. The tide of history is on the side of anti-colonialism. We should be able to prevail.
One of the first things you have to have is, fake ID. So I visited a number of graveyards and picked, someone who had died, as a child, who wasn't likely to have a social security number or any other type of ID, and then applied for that birth certificate, and then applied for driver's license and social security number, and developed a number of IDs that I then used to buy weapons with. As a full-time member of the organization, my routine was, after I did my household obligation of taking the kids to school, I would then start working on whatever we had on the schedule. Whenever we were going to do a bank, check out the bank. We were going to go take the dynamite from a construction depot, go do that. There was a strike on against the power company, checking out the transmission towers to see if we were going to knock one of them out. We sabotaged the power plant at the beginning of Condado Lagoon as a protest against the government for cutting off the power to the residents of Villa Sin Miedo, which was a squatter settlement.
Residents of the settlement, called Villa Sin Miedo, Village Without Fear, had tapped into local power lines, and now the government threatened forcible eviction.
So, when they had their power cut off, we said, all right, well, tit for tat. So it turns out that the radiators, are, of course, made of aluminum. And so all we had to do was bring in some of these spelunking hammers that have a sharp tip and just bip, 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 hit the radiator vanes on this thing, and then all the oil would come out, the thing would blow on. So, it was a pretty simple little operation.
The operation took out the power in one of the most affluent areas of the island. Tens of thousands of hotel guests were plunged into darkness. Los Macheteros leave a communique nailed to a tree in San Juan claiming responsibility.
We felt that we could generate more of a spirit of resistance rather than of submissive acceptance of a reality that we felt was like shockingly unfair.
Despite operating on the violent fringe of the independence movement, their actions gain visibility and lead others to resist. Since 1898, the U.S. had used Puerto Rico as a military stronghold in the Caribbean, eventually building dozens of bases. Then, in the 1940s, the Navy took over most of the island of Vieques for military exercises.
The admiral just called in and said, look, we're going to be bombing on X days. And then this fisherman said, you know all those old fishing traps? Let's take all that rope, we put them across where the Navy ships are going to come through, and their propellers will get tangled, and they'll be dead in the water.
People who live here say they've had enough of the Navy and its shelling. And there were some like Mrs. Hilda Lugo de Vere. She brought her children because, she said, by setting up camp there, they would learn not to be afraid to defend their country.
The protests lead to hundreds of arrests. But some members of Los Macheteros feel that the protests aren't working and call for something more than civil disobedience.
In Puerto Rico today, a United States Navy bus was ambushed by political terrorists firing rifles, shotguns, and pistols.
18 unarmed Navy technicians were going to work in the school bus when the terrorists ambushed them just outside San Juan. 2 were killed and 10 were wounded, including 3 women.
3 groups leave a joint communique in a nearby phone booth claiming responsibility. One of them is Los Macheteros. They state that the attack was in retaliation for a protester at Vieques who was killed while in police custody, and that the actions will continue until Vieques is returned to the Puerto Rican people.
The movement held the Navy accountable. If you kill a prisoner and then claim it's suicide when clear forensic evidence show that he had gashes and bruises all over his body, you have to pay a price.
If they think they're going to drive us out of Vieques with acts like this, they better think again.
People of Puerto Rico don't support this type of activity. In the country, they reject it very vociferously and very strongly. We repudiate this type of action, and we think of these people as our enemies of the people of Puerto Rico.
After the attack, there is internal dissent within Los Macheteros. Many members choose to leave.
¿Se justifican entonces las muertes que surgieron de los actos de los macheteros?
Mire, el problema es el siguiente, y esto usted tiene que ponerlo en el contexto colonial. Esto es un país intervenido militarmente. Entonces la ley internacional permite a los pueblos colonizados luchar por su liberación.
Am I sorry that I took on the monster? That am I sorry that I decided to fight for my country? No, I'm not. I mean, could I have done things differently? Yes, absolutely. Do I now think that violence is not the means to achieve anything? Absolutely. Yeah. That's a lesson learned in life for me.
The Muñiz Air National Guard Base was built in 1956 by the U.S. military. The planes based there had been used to project U.S. military power throughout Latin America. In 1981, a dozen macheteros disguised as fishermen infiltrate the base and begin reconnaissance operations.
At first blush, it looks like, whoa, can this be done? And then, upon closer examination, you realize it's not a piece of cake, but it's definitely doable. I made the mistake of not including Filiberto. And he said, well,
where's my position? And I said, you're not participating, you know. And he said, well, yes, I am. I think he was more aware than the rest of us of how significant this was going to be in terms of the historical importance. And then the final gift was when the National Guard had an open house on the base. So I brought my kids in to look at the planes, went right up to the planes, took pictures of them. You know? And that helped us establish exactly where the explosives was going to be located.
Before dawn today in Puerto Rico, terrorists blew up a number of Air National Guard jet fighters at an American base near San Juan. At least 8 jet fighters were destroyed.
The Corsair jets blew up one after the other. Damage was estimated at $45 million. No one was hurt. A leftist group, which says it wants the United States out of Puerto Rico, has claimed responsibility for the attack. Air Force spokesmen say this is one of the most serious attacks ever against an American military base here or in the United States.
So I didn't get back home until a couple of hours later, and Lucy thought that I had been killed. Once the planes started to blow up, they were loaded with their machine guns. And so the machine guns started to fire.
The morning after the attack, the FBI finds a machete stuck in the ground within yards of one of the airbase security guards. A message that Los Macheteros were close enough to take the guard's life. But unlike the bus attack, this time they ensured that no one was hurt. An internal Los Macheteros document celebrates the attack. We were able to revive the spirit of our people, since this was the most overwhelming blow given to the Yankees since Pearl Harbor. Our organization's prestige was greatly increased. It's made us known all around the world.
And I was surprised by how much tacit support there was and how many people were almost like secretly proud. And of course you can't let on. You know, so you're just sitting, people are commenting about that, and I said, okay, yeah, you know, just.
Word of Puerto Rican resistance spreads beyond the island. Leaders including Pope John Paul II, Robert Kennedy Jr., and Jesse Jackson all push for the United States Navy to leave Vieques. In 2003, after nearly 60 years of bombing, the military ceases active operations on the island. The Macheteros movement is nearly broke. Filiberto Ojeda writes, "We are in need of huge economical resources, and those on hand have a balance of 0. So we must expropriate resources."
Well, the first robbery that I participated in, I was sure we were going to get caught. You know, I'd seen so many TV programs and movies that I felt that, you know, we weren't going to get away with it. And this elderly lady came in, and she started to hyperventilate and was about ready to scream. And I'm going, ma'am, calm down, nothing's going to happen, or whatever. I really didn't know how to handle the situation. And then Filiberto he saw that, and he walked over and said, "Shut up!" And the poor woman went, that was the end of that. So I said, okay, that's how it's done. And, you know, so that was my trial by fire. There's an erroneous view of Los Macheteros that it was mostly about armed action, which is absolutely not the case. It was mostly about political action. And, you know, people were doing good work around women's issues, doing good work, you know, try to get the Navy out of Vieques, you know, all of that. So most of the robberies were done to fund that type of work, you know, rather than wait for proposals for grants to be approved and say, okay, well, we'll go get our own funds. And this guy approached me and he says, you know, he's working on an armored truck and he transports between $7 to $10 million every Monday, and he wants to donate it to the struggle. It's like, whoa, it's almost too good to be true.
This is El Escambrón Beach. This is where he met Filiberto. And Filiberto did the final vetting of him as a combatant.
Somewhere tonight, a Wells Fargo guard, an ex-Wells Fargo guard, is on the run with $7 million in cash. He got away with it last night when he robbed his partner and a Wells Fargo manager in West Hartford, Connecticut.
So when Victor grabbed a supervisor from behind, you know, put him in a headlock and took his supervisor's own gun out of his holster and put it to his head and told him, you know, I'm not working for anybody else anymore. You know, I'm not playing. The supervisor had, you know, heard the tone in Victor's voice that, you know, as he testified in trial, he said, Victor spoke to me in a tone of voice I had never heard before. I was waiting for him outside. It was the longest hour or whatever of my entire life. It was $7.1 million, according to the press. I know it weighed about 1,000 and some odd pounds. You know, the car was riding low.
The thief had so much money to steal from here that he couldn't even haul it all away. Police estimate that he left about $1 million behind.
I felt we had pulled off a great job. Nobody had been caught. Nobody was hurt. Yeah, I was arrogant. My friend loaned me his pickup truck and camper. We were on the turnpike in Pennsylvania going down this pretty steep hill, and this semi blew past us. And we ended up flipped over, facing in the opposite direction on the right-hand lane of the vehicle. The money that was hidden in the wall, behind the walls of the trailer, you know, the panels burst. One of us jumped in the trailer and started throwing the money in bags and stashing it back before the state police arrived. And, you know, we got past that one.
Special agent, you must realize that no case ever ends for the Federal Bureau of Investigation until it is solved and closed with the conviction of the guilty or the acquittal of the innocent.
The FBI arrived in Puerto Rico half a century earlier, but rather than merely pursuing criminals, agents were tasked with squelching the voices of those who were working to gain independence. Soon the mission grows, with agents compiling dossiers on over 100,000 persons of interest, generating nearly 2 million pages of documents. Agents gather details of political affiliation, employment, religious practices, and sexual partners. But despite massive surveillance, Filiberto Ojeda and Juan Segarra continued to evade the FBI for over a decade.
And he stopped right around here and took a shot at there. And I wonder if they fixed it.
In 1983, Los Macheteros used funds from the Wells Fargo robbery to purchase a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher. Their plan is to attack the FBI offices in San Juan. Instead of hitting the FBI offices, they miss, damaging the Department of Agriculture. Being directly fired on invigorates the FBI's hunt for Los Macheteros, and within weeks, they have a new list of surveillance targets.
And the fact that it was an attack to the FBI office, of course, made them feel very personally committed to that investigation. And so, they threw in all of their resources into that.
The FBI gathers enough evidence to get a court order and starts tapping phone conversations and planting microphones in homes and vehicles. Buried in the miles of audio tapes, FBI agents are stunned to hear conversations about $7 million. They soon come to the conclusion that the grenade attack and the Wells Fargo robbery were both done by Los Macheteros. By 1985, the FBI has gathered reams of evidence linking Segarra to the Wells Fargo robbery. An FBI raid rounds up 11 macheteros, charging them with conspiracy in the Wells Fargo robbery. Segarra and Ojeda Rios are jailed without bond. Initially, the government plans to charge the group with seditious conspiracy, planning to overthrow the U.S. government.
Filiberto and I were in this facility for about a year during the pretrial hearings. They have like a list of pictures of like the 10 inmates that you need to be on the lookout for correctional officers, And so that piques their curiosity. And so we talk, and it's not too hard, for an American to understand independence, and to understand that, if somebody invaded your country, what would you do? How would you feel if you'd lost the war against the Japanese and every law that was passed here in the United States had to be approved by the Japanese Congress? Oh, well, that's not fair. Yeah, tell me about it, Guys would get it. And Americans don't have a problem with violence at all. I mean, if anything, they're too prone to violence. So the fact that we had resorted to violence for that, in favor of independence or the freedom of our country or whatever is like, well, yeah, of course.
Segarra and Filiberto Ojeda, along with the other defendants, are held in pretrial detention for 2 years, confined to their cells for up to 23 hours a day.
Ser un machetero es ser un terrorista.
No, muy equivocada. Nosotros repudiamos y yo personalmente repudio el terrorismo.
Pero es una actividad delictiva, es un delito.
Bajo el derecho internacional, bajo cualquier ley justa, el luchar por la independencia de su país no puede ser delito en ningún sitio. Los mismos americanos lucharon por la independencia de su país. Es curioso porque aquí cerca, en Lexington, hay un monumento a los soldados británicos que los Minutemen, que así se llamaban, los patriotas clandestinos de Massachusetts en aquel entonces, emboscaron a los soldados británicos y los mataron cuando iban a traer una orden de allanamiento.
Pero Segarra, para alguna gente en Puerto Rico y en otras partes del mundo, las actuaciones de los macheteros, sus actuaciones podrán ser actuaciones patrióticas, o sea, heroicas de patriotas, pero para otra gente son sencillamente actos de delincuencia, de terrorismo. En esos extremos, ¿cómo te percibes y cómo te ubicas? ¿Como un patriota o como un delincuente?
Yo aspiro a servir a mi patria. En ese sentido me considero patriota.
¿Te consideras un héroe?
No.
After 2 years of imprisonment, a judge rules that the pretrial detention was unconstitutional and that defendants are released on bail. Filiberto Ojeda is fitted with a GPS tracking ankle bracelet to ensure that he doesn't escape. On September 23, 1990, facing a potential 130-year sentence, Filiberto Ojeda cuts his bracelet and once again goes underground.